Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for ADramOfOutlander.com for all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is episode 108, Creme de Menthe, TV episode 307. It was written by Margaret Campbell and directed by Norma Bailey. Well, hello, welcome to another week of the podcast. Now that we've gotten over the Jamie and Claire reunion, we can get into sort of the meat and potatoes of the television show for the rest of the season. There were some interesting comments last week. The biggest issue that people had with the episode was Sam Heughan's apparent lack of emotion and his too quick to show the portrait of William and share that he has a son he couldn't raise with Claire. I liked the restraint that Sam showed and that he brought to the character. Yes, it was in the script for him to fall apart and boo-hoo, but she just shocked the bejesus out of him. He fainted. She's been there very little time, and he's pretty stunned. He never expected to see her again, and she shows him pictures of Brianna, and I think there was a lot of emotion. It was just brimming under the surface. Did he fall apart? No. Would he? Probably not. Would he feel that vulnerable with her very quickly like that? I don't think he would. He's had to have a lot of years of restraint, just like Claire. It's all pent up. Did he share about Willie too quickly? At first I felt that way, but after watching the episode more, it made sense. He just had to spit it out because she was the only other person he believed he could tell. And I did see feedback of how people thought it was underwhelming. They were disappointed. And it's because it went from being this super fast, skipping lots of time period and condensing it to one 24-hour period. And it was a slow burn. And I don't know how you would have reacted to seeing somebody after 20 years, the love of your life, your soulmate. I imagine it would be very awkward and restrained. And you know what? Within about 8 or 10 hours, they were in bed together multiple times. So I'd say that's pretty quick moving for a first date back together. Interesting. But that was kind of the crux of things. But there was such blowback on social media that Sam actually came to defense of himself. And there's articles in mass media about him defending what he did. Interesting. This is where I have to caution those who've read the books, which is probably a good percentage of the viewers of the show. I don't know how many, but I would bet at least 50%. Maybe. I could be wrong. I have no numbers. I'm just pulling it out of my behind. You really have to separate your expectations and the vision that you have for these characters from your viewing. You're going to have to watch the episodes more than once in order to allow those filters to be suspended a little bit. Adaptations can be done well, and they can honor the spirit of things, and they can be done poorly. I think it's this season being done very well. And I work very hard to see it through the lens of a viewer and to minimize my book thoughts. Because those people, those characters, those storylines, those timelines, those words, they're never going away. We can always go back to the books. And it's not pat phrasing. It's not me trying to say, just get on the bandwagon. That's not it. I'm critical when I think things don't work in the context of the storytelling in the TV show, but it's outside of what the books offer. Does it work? Does it not work? How does it How does it feel and come across to viewers who don't know the material at all? And it's nice living with one of those because I can ask him questions that are not leading and to see what his responses are and see if what my instincts say and what my brain says about how something came across, if I'm letting go of the book filters as much as I need to see the TV process unfold well. And I really am trying to do that. Of course, there are things I absolutely want to see, and there's emotions I want evoked, and there's storylines I don't want usurped. But that's for the first viewing. And then the second or third, maybe fourth viewing is for you, the podcast listeners. It's for me to take extensive notes and screen captures and to see what the writer's room was trying to tell us. What does it look like? What clues are they leaving for the future? And I will tell you if I don't think something makes sense or it plays odd and it doesn't fit into the context of an episode as being interesting on its own, or is it only there as a plot device to move the story forward? Hey, Diana Gabaldon did that in some of the books. There's a key storyline that, if you listen to the read-along podcast in this season, that I thought was totally contrived and it never would have happened that way. And it was simply put there to be a future storyline hook. And nobody's immune from that when they're writing. Okay. So this episode, Claire's only been back about 24 hours. She had just come off of a lovely meal with the working ladies at Madame Jean's. And there was a man in the room who was looking for Jamie's ledgers, right? And she's fighting with the man. Remember, she's only in her shift, which is basically a nightgown. And she gets a knife and she cuts his hand. And ultimately, he ends up slipping on the clothing on the floor, which is what it looked like. It was very difficult to see. And he hits his head on the hearth. Claire's a healer. She's come from a time that overall is much more peaceful. Women are treated with a lot more respect, even though not nearly what it could be in the late 1960s. Claire has been in a field where she's been challenged and made fun of and mocked, I'm sure. But she did it anyway because she had to. It wasn't for the great purpose of moving women forward. It's because she needed to do it. And in the process, it did move women forward. So she's really stunned and she's in a bit of shock, it looks like. She thinks the man's dead and Jamie comes back and he wants to know what happened, and she shakes her head a bit and tells him basically what happened and that it happened so fast, and he wants her to let the man die. And she says she can't. She must help him. And I know from some of the early bird viewing comments already that people are thinking this is really over the top, that she would save this man. No, there's a precedence for her to do that in the TV show. She was saving English soldiers who were fighting the opposite of the Jacobites. Everyone, equally. And she worked hard to, in an unbiased way, tend to people. And we have to remember, too, this has been her whole passion focus for years, was medical school and practicing as a surgeon, as a healer. She didn't put her emotions anywhere. Those were clamped down. But all her force and all her passion, what she would use for love, was all put in to her work. And so we're going to have to see how she balances that hyper focus with the reality of having Jamie there and somebody who has an opinion and somebody who she cares about and still loves, even though she's going to have to learn to love the new person in front of her because he's not the same, just like he will her. And there'll be concessions and it'll be a growth curve. But it makes sense to me that she would do that. And it is there to move forward how she will tend to people throughout the rest of the series. The 18th century is a much more brutal place. And there'll be a lot of use, as Jamie says later, for her skill set. And Jamie's obviously annoyed at her, right? And she claims it's an epidural hematoma, bleeding on the brain. I'm going to be doing an Outlander Science Club bonus podcast this week because now we can get into Claire's science and medicine, and I'll be covering what this diagnosis is and the herbs and other medicines that she uses, as well as the trephine that gets pulled out. So be on the lookout for that. Interestingly, Madame Jean and Fergus come in. And Claire calls Jamie his given name, Jamie. She doesn't call him Alex or Alexander. Does Madame Jean know his real name? I mean, she only refers to him as Mr. Malcolm. That was odd. What does Madame Jean know? I don't know. Turns out this man is an exciseman. He works for Sir Percival, and he's probably a crooked guy working for a crooked guy for the crown. And Jamie explains the protection agreement that he has with Sir Percival, and that Sir Percival is getting greedy and wanted more money from him. And Fergus asked Jamie if Sir Percival could know that they've moved outside of the city with their smuggling. And Jamie says he doesn't know, which is patently not true because Sir Percival brought it up at the World's End when Jamie met with him to pay him off. So that was weird. Why do you think Jamie would lie right there? Did he honestly not remember because he was so shocked that Claire was back? I don't think so. That's not how Jamie's mind works. That's a puzzlement to me. And it's really awkward. He wants to just tell her what to do, and she's stubborn as always, and she has a need to do this. And there might be some sort of impasse here. So Claire checks the man's pupils and said there's time, and she sends Madame Jean to have one of the discreet girls get a trephine, which is the nice screw implement from a barber surgeon who will likely have one. She's going to drill a hole in the man's head to release the pressure. Yay! See, I'm all about the gory medical stuff, so I know for some of you it was really gross to see her do this. I thought it was really cool. And Claire decides he's stable enough at the very moment. She's going to run off to the apothecary to get items that she needs. Jamie sends Fergus to take care of the casks, and he's going to send somebody to be in the room with the man because he's going to go help with the casks as well. Okay. So Claire is boogieing down the main street after she's tried to explain to Jamie again that she has to save him. And he tries to remind her about the law that she'd be arrested for assaulting the man because she was a married woman alone in a brothel with this man who was not her husband. Isn't that fabulous? Women being treated so wonderfully. I don't care if it is a whore. If somebody assaults a working girl, they should be going to jail for it. And Mr. Willoughby puts his input. He says he admires a woman who values the sanctity of human life. I think that's a good point, and that's going to come back. And it looks like they're setting up Willoughby, also known as Tien Cho, to be sort of medical partners in crime. Like he might be her assistant going forward. We'll have to see how that plays out. So Jamie, young Ian, Fergus, Leslie and Hayes, the two men who called him McDoo at the print shop, are working to get the bootleg alcohol out of Madame Jean's basement. And they're pretty much trash talking Claire. And Jamie's not really coming to her defense here. So he must be really annoyed. I'm surprised that he's not saying more, except he doesn't know her well again. He knows what he knew. And he's probably not sure if he's really liking her even more deep desire to heal people and just how much more it's imprinted on her at this point. I think Jamie and Claire have an equal protective nature. Different ways, but equal. So Jamie entrusts young Ian Fergus to go sell all the bootleg alcohol, even if it means not making a profit, okay? And I had to laugh when Claire gets to the apothecary because I was like, oh, she went to the hipster apothecary. That's what the man reminded me of who was running the store. It made me snicker for a second. And she's in a hurry, so she offers to treat the other customer's sister if she can go ahead of him. She needs yarrow root, laudanum, and something I'm not sure. I have to look it up. It sounded like tarantile. I don't know what that is. So I probably misheard and need to watch that section again to figure out what the heck she bought. And she boogies on out of there back to the brothel. And the man, I should say, who she met, the other customer, is Archie Campbell, and his sister is Margaret, who Claire will be going to look in on later. Young Ian and Fergus are hard selling the booze. He's a really good salesman, and they're just chatting, and Fergus remembers Claire as spirited, brave, and fearless as a healer, and that she saved many lives. But there were also rumors that she took a few, and young Ian thinks if she took any lives, there had to be a really good reason. Well, the rumors were, I'm sure, column, right? And Con Saint-Germain is another. Okay. And she had participated in Dougal's death. So, I mean, he's saying basically that she's dangerous. Like, don't cross her. And he's blaming Claire for the exciseman catastrophe. Which I find interesting, because if Claire hadn't been there, Sir Percival's guy would have shown up anyway. And then Jamie would have happened upon him in the room and had to kill him. Right? This has nothing to do with Claire. She happens to be a victim of circumstances, and that Sir Percival was already hot on Jamie and is trying to extort more money out of him for protection. That's what this is about. Claire just happened to be there. She wasn't doing anything wrong. Now, the fact that she was trying to save the man is a bit problematic because they couldn't take care of the body immediately and just move forward. So back in the brothel, Jamie and Tien Cho are trying to restrain the now conscious exciseman. Claire returns and she kind of flips out on them for manhandling him, but he's being really noisy. And there's a lot of tension between Jamie and Claire at this point. Claire pours laudanum down the man's throat and he becomes still. So she's going to do that surgery now. She and Tien Cho are going to do it together. There's a knock on the door, and guess what? Sir Percival is downstairs. He says Jamie is withholding from him, and he's going to search the premises, and Jamie says, sure, go ahead. So they're doing that while Claire is using the trephine to release the pressure in this man's brain and to drain it. It seems successful from our vantage point. Sir Percival and the one-eyed man find nothing, but he remains suspicious. He knows Jamie's up to something. So, whew, Madame Jean and Jamie missed that bullet. By the time Jamie returns, the man has died. And Claire's a little bit tense about this and makes a snarky comment about Jamie should be happy about it. And she and Tien Cho are cleaning the instruments. And he defends Claire to Jamie. He says that honorable wife fought to save the man. She put her best foot forward. Claire is upset. Jamie sees it as the best outcome. He sends Tien Cho to get Leslie and Hayes to help with the body. And he, kind of resets, and Jamie says, "You tried, but God took him. God has nothing to do with this." Claire feels she failed him. She rarely lost patience. She was a perfectionist. And she took healing people very seriously. And if she had had a modern hospital, it would have been in Boston. And Jamie tries to comfort her. But all these things are at odds within him, trying to connect with her right now. He knows why she did it, but he doesn't agree with why she did what she did. And really, was it a lot of time? I don't know, an hour or so? Didn't really put them back far. The ultimate outcome was the same, but Claire is now really unsettled. She feels terrible for losing someone and for causing Jamie trouble. And at first, that apology, I was like, why is she apologizing? This man was in the room. She had nothing to do with it. But it was her coming back and just crashing into his life and disrupting everything he's doing. And that, of course, is causing trouble because Jamie's not able just to function how he normally does. It's putting him at risk because he's distracted, right? And he tries again to comfort her, and he assures her he would lose everything for them to be together. He was a shell of a human without her, and she's worth all he has. And Claire is sort of numb here. And she's just looking at him and like, okay, but she can't really take it in and process it. She's trying to deal with this loss that just happened and this attack that just happened and remembering how things are for women in that era. And she doesn't have all the modern medicine to rely on, and there will be losses. And I was thinking that as to myself being a midwife, if I went back in time, I would have a better record than probably most midwives and doctors. I'd have a great record at healthy moms and healthy babies. But I would certainly lose them too. We don't lose mothers in modern era. Not with healthy women in birth. We don't lose mothers that much. Not in our westernized world. It hardly ever happens. It's so rare. There are some baby losses, but it's still really uncommon. And the idea that I would go back and not be able to have every woman survive birth and nearly every baby, nearly 100% survive and be healthy and well, that would be horrifying to me. That would be a psychic hit on me, and that would be emotionally devastating. So Claire is processing multiple things right now. And she's not had to do it with another human. She's just had to do it within herself. She and Frank didn't process these things together. I mean, she had Dr. Joe, but really she was a loner. And she kept things close to the vest for the most part. And at the end of this moment that they're having, he says it was as if the sun returned and cast out the darkness. So he's happy she's back. And she just kind of shakes her head and looks at him and says she's going to see a patient. And he shifts from being kind of with her in this space to being worried and not wanting her to leave on her own. And he says he's worried for her safety, but he's really worried that she's not going to come back because she's so traumatized. She might just leave. And she assures him she's coming back. but I get why she's shut down emotionally. We move to young Ian and Fergus celebrating their profitable sales day in a pub. And they start discussing sex, and this is a really weird kind of non sequitur. Yeah, do I think young men would be discussing sex and ogling women at a pub? Oh, sure. It just feels really weird to me how Fergus was just like, hey, you need to get some. It seemed very awkward and strange. Now, Fergus is a Frenchman, I get that. But he's also maybe 30 years old, and young Ian is 16. It's strange. So young Ian discovers how Fergus lost his virginity, and this whole scene, to me, seems like it's negligible. Like it's not needed in this episode. Now, whether or not the information or him losing his virginity is important to some later plot point, I don't think it plays reasonably here. I think it's just feels like an add-on that we could have used for something else. And it's not that he lost his virginity, it's how was set out to lose his virginity. It was more, it didn't make sense how it was portrayed to me. And I asked my husband, and he said it didn't add anything to the episode and it felt contrived and odd. But what he did see was the relationship between Fergus and young Ian being strong, and that he felt like these characters were being developed as the next generation behind Claire and Jamie. And I thought that was really interesting. What do you think? Now, I know most people are not in agreement from all the comments I have read from the early viewings on this. Most people thought it was sweet, that it was pertinent, that it made sense for these young men to be acting this way, and that why wouldn't it come up and Fergus just kind of throw young Ian in to the sexual fire, so to speak. And I do love the chemistry between these two actors, and they do seem genuinely close and like they like each other. And young Ian is adorable, and he's very believable in this role. The one thing of interest here was that the one-eyed man was lurking in the same pub. So now we have this melancholic Claire. She looks like somebody killed her cat. And she's heading through the streets of Edinburgh to go see the Campbells. And we get to meet Margaret, and her brother says she's a seer, they're fortune tellers. And she's not often right in the head. Her wits are not usually about her. And he had given her some laudanum, which Claire said not to do. It's not good to give her on a daily use basis. So Claire goes to grab her hand, and Margaret jerks awake, and she starts making sounds, and she speaks of Abandawe, Abandawe, and the blood moon. Is this prophecy toward Claire? I think this is a prophecy, that she's actually has a vision. Why would they put that particularly there? So remember that. I think it's important. And then afterwards she goes catatonic, and she's not anymore paying attention, and Claire cannot get a reaction out of her. They discuss her condition, and Claire thinks she has a mental disorder, not that she's a seer. And the brother says, yeah, she's been soft in the head since she was a bairn, so she's always been odd. Claire offers her advice, mistletoe tea with tansy oil and valerian for sleep. But she wants to see her again, but the brother, Archie, tells her that they are heading to the West Indies because they have a wealthy client waiting for them. Ooh, who do you think that wealthy client might be? I have a guess. I would love to hear from you guys on that. So they're heading on this fairly treacherous journey all the way from Edinburgh to the West Indies. And so he needs to be able to keep her subdued as much as possible. So we flash back over to young Ian and Bridget, and they're at the print shop, and they're getting busy. It's fine. Claire returns to the brothel, and Jamie is doing his accounts. He's sitting at the table with all the money that was brought in. So Fergus must have taken the money to him after leaving the brothel. He explains the body's in a cask of Creme de Menthe, and it won't matter because Scots don't drink it anyway, so no one's going to find the man. And Claire sits down at the table, and she brings up wanting to have a place of their own. And Jamie says, and leave the brothel. And her response is, surely you don't expect us to make a home here. Not forever, he agrees, but for now it's got everything they need and no rent. And he sends nearly all his money back to Lollybrock. And she says she can open a practice and she can earn money and they can have a good life here. She liked having a patient today. And the way she said it was as if she hadn't seen patients in months. I mean, it's only been a couple of weeks, but maybe it's treating one-on-one. Maybe it's treating individually and not just doing surgeries where there's a distance between her and a patient. I was trying to figure that one out. I was like, Claire, you've been here for a day and a half, maybe. It's not as if you left your practice a long time back, not in her own timeline. So I thought that was just strange. Maybe I'm overthinking it, probably. And Jamie has no chance to respond. This episode has a lot of that in it, where there's no conclusion. And this is one of those things that has no conclusion to it. There's no real conclusion to Jamie understanding Claire's need, right? And now there's no conclusion to her calling for a life that they can build in Edinburgh, where she can be as vital as he is. And there's a knock at the door saying Ian Murray is there to see them. So Jamie and Claire hurriedly downstairs, and Jamie says not to mention seeing young Ian, and he'll explain it later. And she's pretty perplexed by that, obviously. Ian Murray is absolutely shocked to see Claire. He tells her how he and Jenny had grieved for years. And she says she sailed to Boston until she learned that Jamie was alive and she returned. And Jamie made a point of saying he was glad that she did. Okay, so that secret, it's showing up on him and it's getting more urgent. Ian is there looking for young Ian, who ran away again. And of course, Jamie lies. And Jamie says he's sure he'll appear soon and promises to bring him to Lollybrock if he turns up. So Ian came all the way to Edinburgh for a few-minute conversation with Jamie. I mean, he's doing his own searching, but could he have not sent a letter? I don't know. I know, so he's apparently searching Edinburgh on his own, but if anybody would have seen him, Jamie would, because he's gone to him before. And as Jamie's walking Ian out, he says, Claire must have taken the news well. And Ian cautions him not to wait to tell her. And Jamie is really working hard to convince himself all will be well. It's fine. She's just come back. I'll tell her as soon as I can. So Jamie is working really hard to convince himself that him omitting some big truth, a big secret, is okay. And I think that has something to do with his countenance and how he will be speaking to Claire in the next scenes. So we're back at the print shop. She hears something, then he hears it, and he sends Bridget away. He sees the one-eyed man and confronts him. A fight ensues. the guy finds a seditious hidden material, shoots a young Ian, but instead lights the place on fire. The guy gets away after Ian throws some molten metal or molten something at him. Ink, whatever's molten, I don't know what it is. Throws it at him. The guy gets out, but now the place is on fire and young Ian is stuck. So that's where that's left. He's trying to figure out how to get out. So Claire had made her way back up to the bedroom, right? And Claire is angry with Jamie for lying. The first thing he says is the years apart cannot erase the meaning behind that look. And Claire asks why he's lied and didn't at least say he'd seen the young man, for the sake of Ian and Jenny, because they must be worried sick. And Jamie tries to explain, but it's pretty hollow. I mean, the boy keeps coming back after he sends him home. He's trying to teach him the ways of the world, and he says Jenny and Ian don't know what's good for that boy. And this raises some ire in Claire. And he says Claire shouldn't judge him for lying. Okay, this has nothing to do with Claire. This is him withholding that big secret from Claire, I think, where he's saying this. It's his own guilt. And he says that she's helped him in past deceptions and colluded with him, like in Paris. And she didn't tell Ian where she was, really. What happened to her after Culloden. He's trying to justify it really hard. And I think he's being an ass. But just like Claire, he's not have to explain himself to anybody. He hasn't had to emotionally invest in that way. He hasn't had to be responsible for his actions in the same way, because it's been him he's had to worry about. And he could do whatever he wanted in that context, just like Claire and her work, but icing out Frank. So Claire tries to respond, but at some point she says that he has no idea what it's like to be a worried parent. And that's at the heart of this. He doesn't. You're not the boy's father, Jamie. And now he lashes out. He brings up not getting to raise Brianna as if he's blaming her. He had no say in how she and Frank brought Brianna up. He bitches about the bikini, right? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, mister. You sent her back so Frank could raise the child, right? So that Brianna would have a father and have a chance at survival. And Claire says, Christ, I'd forgotten how bloody rigid this century is. A woman is a Madonna or a whore. But she stays really calm. I don't think I would have been so calm. I don't know how she's maintaining. And she asks if she and Frank had raised Brianna to be a criminal, a smuggler, a traitor, then he would approve. And he says at least her virtue wouldn't have been endangered. And I'm thinking, why does he care? He's not very religious. Why does it matter? I mean, that just seemed like a low blow. And Claire just says to him, says the man living in a brothel. It is. It seems very hypocritical. And she tells him that Frank was a wonderful father. I know this is Jamie's pain coming out, his inability to raise his child, and then he couldn't raise Willie either. But is he doing right by young Ian, by allowing him to lie to his parents and not tell them, and to put him at risk in a life that is that great for a 16-year-old? And then Jamie looks at her, and this is where he kind of comes a bit unhinged, and he's being unkind. And he says, was he a wonderful husband as well? And I'm like, oh, FFS, Jamie, you sent her back to be loved and protected to a life she knew. This is his guilt over hiding a secret. Claire told him everything. This is Jamie's jealousy. It's his loss. It's his grief. It's his pain. But it's still rude. And it's unkind. And Claire handled it really well, way better than me. And she just tells him that she cared for Frank and loved him before Jamie. But no, that's not what she had with him. So she told him essentially that she didn't fall back in love. But Jamie sent her back to be loved. But that's a painful truth. It's one thing to do it and then never know the outcome. It's another to have the outcome right in front of you and have the possibility of having to live with the baggage of that outcome or the change in the person in front of you. How do you think that was? Was he justified in his actions? I mean, some people have said that she's being a nag. I don't think she's being a nag about young Ian. She knows what it's like to worry over a child day in and day out. She, was there. She was the mom. Do you think he's being fair? I mean, I think it's a little rough for both of them, but I think they both can be right to some degree, but I think she's more right. So this doesn't get resolved either. Because Madame Jean opens the door and says there's a fire at Carfax Close. So now we've been disrupted again. So we have this hanging out there. So it's the print shop. Jamie heroically grabs Claire's cape, it reminds me of Batman, runs in, figures out how to save young Ian, who's passed out, and Jamie realizes young Ian is there because he normally sleeps in the back of the print shop. So that's why I was wondering how the whole him losing his virginity played into this episode in an interesting way. What impact did it have? Because he didn't need to do that in order to get to the print shop. Because that Fergus would have come along and said, young Ian's in the print shop. He took a lass back. Then that would have made sense to why young Ian was there. But if he was already supposed to be there, it's weird to me. Anyhow, Jamie uses Bonnie, the printing press. He pushes her over and climbs up her to freedom. So it was funny when Jamie jumped down to get young Ian. It did look like a Batman moment when he jumped over the railing down into the print shop. And while he's in there, he grabs the portrait of Willie. Did Claire keep Brianna's photographs? Are they at the brothel? Or did Jamie only grab the portrait of Willie and leave the photographs of Brianna? We don't know. So as Jamie gets out, the print shop is starting to fall down around him, and he does get to safety. And it's sad because something he worked so hard for and was good at, his weapon of choice, was gone. Young Ian explains what happened and that the man got some pamphlets and they discuss how sedition is high treason, etc. And Jamie says they're going to go to a particular place, and Claire says they need to take young Ian home to be safe, back to Lallybroch. And Jamie agrees and says he has some business to take care of while she's tending to young Ian, and pulls Tien Cho and Fergus off to the side, confabbing. He's giving them their portions and has Tien Cho take the portions for the other two guys. And then he and Fergus are discussing that he needs to try and intercept the one-eyed man before he gets to Percival, and to send news to Ned Gowan about Lallybroch, about that matter they spoke of. And Fergus thinks it's better if Jamie doesn't take Claire to Lallybroch. And Jamie is just certain that Belrigan is far enough away. Does he not remember living in the Highlands? Gossip is a commodity and it travels lightning speed. It's like the internet of their time. He's just justifying it to himself, and he's trying so hard. He's wearing these rose-colored glasses, and he thinks it's going to be okay. And Fergus is shocked that Claire doesn't know about the other wife. So yes, he has another wife. Do we know who? Nope. And Jamie says he'll explain once Claire and young Ian are safe. So he's trying really hard to make this okay. Like every hour it ticks on, it's getting worse and worse for him. Because now they have no choice but to go to Lallybroch. So the life that Jamie has known in Edinburgh, inside of these day and a half amount of hours, are up in smoke. The cat's out of the bag. Like, he can't be a smuggler for a while. He has to make himself disappear. Tien Cho has to disappear and kind of keep in hiding for a while. The other two men that work with him have to do the same. And I presume that Fergus will eventually meet him at Lallybroch once he takes care of things. We don't know that. Okay. So again, this is a very short time period that they're looking at. And they brought up several times Jamie's secret. Now we know what the secret is, the other wife, right? And we see that Claire has had this emotional constipation, right? She hasn't had to juggle her processing and what she's doing and take anybody else into consideration. She hasn't been in an intimate relationship with anyone. It's different being a mom. You can isolate those things and mother your children and with emotion and passion and love. It's different. And she shared some of that with Joe, but not all of it. So now she has to sit back and try and take into consideration who Jamie is, what his values are now, what he's willing to do, what he's turned into. But also, who is she? Who is she in the 18th century? Can she do it? Is it worth the price? Was she in love with her memories? But is the reality going to be okay? Is he going to be enough? Can she manage the 18th century the way she used to? I mean, it was a choice this time. She didn't just fall through the stones. And what about Jamie? He seems really uncaring in some ways. And is that because he's had to lock up his love and passion? I mean, he's got a wife, right? But he lives in Edinburgh and doesn't spend time with his wife. So there's a clue. He seems that his compassion is lacking. And he's lived in a colorless world. And he's the only one who's had to justify what he's doing. It's to himself. He doesn't have to for anybody else. As long as he takes care of Fergus and young Ian and the other men who work for him and he's careful, it's fine. But it seems like his conscience is a little buried. It's hidden. And he seems pretty non-religious. So he doesn't have faith to fall back on and to utilize. So he seems hard in comparison to what I might expect. And there is rigidity there because of circumstances. Do you think Claire was over the top? Was it out of character for her to demand to try and heal the exciseman? I think it was in character, and I think we had that set up from the very beginning, and how she treated fallen soldiers, etc. I think it's well in character. And now that she's an actual physician and surgeon, it's even going to be more so. And it was her life's blood for a decade and a half. That was what fed her, because she didn't have the passionate, intimate, sexual, vulnerable relationship with Jamie. She had to put all of that energy somewhere else. And I wonder what role the Campbells will play in that vision that Margaret Campbell had of Abandawe. Am I saying that right? I don't know. I think she said it differently. But that's how it is in my head, and I can't change it even if I'm saying it incorrectly. So please correct me. I want to know how it's supposed to be said. Will there be any fallout about young Ian? How is the wife going to be dealt with in Ned Gowan? I mean, there's a lot of loose ends here, and Jamie and Claire never came to conclusions in their conversations of that day. We'll have to see. This was definitely an episode that was a connector to other episodes. Some things stood alone, but it's obvious that it's to move the storylines forward. I think at moments it didn't work great, but in other moments it worked very well. So we'll have to see. This is probably the lowest episode of the season for me, but I still enjoyed it. It's still good, and I'll watch it again. And I thank you so much for listening, and I would love to get your feedback, whether it's on social media at adramaofoutlander.com. It's on Facebook, a Drama of Outlander page, or group, the group you have to ask to join, and there are some questions you have to answer, so I know you're not a bot or a troll. And also, the episodes go up on YouTube. You can leave comments there. And they're on all the streaming services, including iTunes, which is now Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Play, and many other services harvest from Apple Podcasts and put the episode up. So there's a variety of ways to listen. You can also listen directly through the website. So share it with other people, please. Every Wednesday night, there is a Twitter chat that goes on, and we use the hashtag ADOO for a Drama of Outlander. It's at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and we talk about the prior week's episode. And we've had some new people join in, and it's been really good debate and fun, and sometimes it's a little saucy, like the working girls at the brothel would be like. I quite enjoy it. And if you would like to support the podcast, there are a variety of ways to do so. The first one is go and like the social media pages. Instagram and Twitter are Drama of Outlander. The Facebook page and group, YouTube, Google+. Share the podcast, please. Share with other people. Go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, and leave a review. That will bring me up in rankings and help people to find me. I want to thank those of you who recently, in the last month and a half, have gone in and put in reviews. I appreciate you greatly. Every single one helps, and I know it takes a little bit of your time and energy, and I'm glad that you did it for me. I'm still looking for someone to help take out small quotes and tidbits that you liked. If you want to help me with that, you just need to mark the time in the podcast that the comment starts and the time that it ends, and I can go in and retrieve it from my MP3. so we can use it as little sound bites. I also want your feedback and comments and questions. Contact at adramavoutlander.com, or the listener line is 719-425-9444. And comments could be included in a future podcast. As a reminder, there will be a bonus podcast this week under Outlander Science Club to talk about the herbs, the medicines, and the trephine, and that epidural hematoma. That should be up about midweek for you. And if you want to financially support the podcast, you go to patreon.com/adramavoutlander, and you can offer as little as $1 a month. And every little bit counts. I'm a solo podcaster and paying for everything on my own. So if you like what you hear, please consider a donation. And if you want to do a one-time donation, just email me or leave a voice message or leave a message on social media privately, and I will contact you about how to do that. I think it's going to be really interesting to see comments moving forward after the episode airs on its Sunday night time slot. I'm a bit surprised that they dropped the wife bomb and didn't let that unfold naturally. Now that I sit here and think about it a little bit more. Well, as always, I thank you for listening, and I would not do this if it wasn't for you. Thank you for coming back week after week and participating with me. Until next time, slán je va.